Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this session. I know that it's a little bit later in the day. I was joking with some of the people that this panel got pushed towards the end, so it's a panel on teaching. And something very similar keeps happening to Pakistan's teachers as well. We just kind of get pushed to the end of everybody's decision-making process. So today we want to talk a little bit about how we can support Pakistan's teachers more effectively. Yeah? Okay, take a second. Am I audible? Yeah? Okay. I was just saying that, today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can support Pakistan's teachers more effectively. And we don't have all the answers, but it can start by at least talking about these issues. If the panelists don't mind, can we keep it bilingual? Yeah? So I just want to, हमें बताया गया था कि ये सेशन रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है and then इसको YouTube पे भी डाला जाएगा and I just want कि पाकिस्तान में कोई भी अगर इस गुफ्तगू को सुन रहा हो तो उनको भी ये समझ आ सके। अक्सर हमारा सबसे बड़ा इशू पाकिस्तान में यही होता है कि इस तरह की जो महफिलें होती हैं उसमें सब बहुत अच्छी गुफ्तगू करते हैं लेकिन वो अंग्रेज़ी में होती है और इसलिए जब YouTube पे लोग सुनना चाहते भी हैं तो वो जिसको कहते हैं ना उनकी एक्सेसिबिलिटी नहीं होती। तो एक्सेसिबिलिटी सिर्फ ये नहीं होती कि व्हीलचेयर रैंप नहीं है, वो ज़ुबान का भी एक बहुत बड़ा मसला बन जाता है। आई वाज जस्ट वांट के स्पेशली जो हमारे असातिज़ा हैं जो पब्लिक स्कूल्स में ख़ास तौर पे और लो कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में जो इतनी मेहनत कर रहे हैं पूरे पाकिस्तान में, I really would want कि उनको भी ये महसूस हो कि वो भी इस गुफ्तगू में शामिल हों और आगे जाके उनके साथ भी ये बातचीत कर सकें। आज के हमारे 3 पैनलिस्ट्स यहाँ पे हॉल में मौजूद हैं एंड do we have Rabea online? Is Rabea online? Rabea, are you online? Can you hear us?
Rabea has to join us online.
Okay. Can I just sorry, ये लाइट्स काफ़ी ब्राइट है, मुझे एक्चुअली नज़र भी नहीं आ रहा कौन कहाँ बैठा है, लेकिन can I request somebody from Teach for Pakistan to help get Rabea online, please? So in the meantime, मैं बाकी सबका तारुफ करा देती हूँ. So today we have Dr. Irfan Muzaffar. Dr. Irfan Muzaffar is the CEO of the Mergla Faq Collective. This is a social enterprise curating innovative solutions for education and development. With vast experience in education, research, and consulting, Irfan Sahab is passionate about transforming education through evidence-based policies and practices. So basically, Irfan Sahab के बारे में ये है कि I think Irfan Sahab आपने पंजाब और केपी के जो पिछले एक दहाई में या उससे थोड़े से ज़्यादा सबसे ज़्यादा असातिज़ा के हवाले से जो चेंजेस आई हैं आपने उनको देखा है, राइट? और आपने उनके बारे में काफ़ी प्लानिंग की है और ब्यूरोक्रेट्स के साथ झगड़े भी शायद किए होंगे इन द प्रोसेस। So I think, sorry G, go ahead Irfan Sahab. That's kind of what that area that you've been in, right? I mean, eventually, let me just introduce everyone first, and then I would love if you could bring that element in as well. Are we still audible?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Rabea is with us.
Okay, great. So Rabea is behind us, and hey Rabea. So Dr. Rabea Malik is a senior fellow at the Institute of Development and Economic Alternatives, which is called IDEAS. So IDEAS is based in Lahore. It's a research institute in Lahore, and she's led research projects on marketization of primary and secondary education, which Rabea, you can correct me if I'm wrong, which has to do kind of with the private school के effects होते हैं on the wider education landscape. And then she's also looked at school-based management, inclusive education, and I think आज के panel के लिए The most exciting thing about what Rabea's been up to is that when she was a faculty member at the LUM School of Education, she helped set up like a cross-country course which used the RISE systems diagnostic framework to think about how education reform happens in different contexts. और ख़ास तौर पे मतलब कि ध्यान किस चीज़ पे दिया जाता है उस कोर्स के तहत इसके एजुकेशन के अंदर भी और एजुकेशन के बाहर के भी जो शोबे हैं वो सारे इकट्ठे आके जोड़ के किस तरह तालीम को बेहतर तरीके से फराहम करवा सकते हैं. So Rabea, thanks so much for joining us. Rabea is based in Karachi, which is why she's online. Can you see us?
Thank you very much. And thanks for the flexibility for letting me join. I feel I'm moving a bit, but thank you very much.
Okay. Can everybody hear Rabea clearly?
Yes.
Cool. Our next panelist is Zohra Nasir. Zohra is the Director of Academics at Zindagi Trust and an alumna of the... Alumna or alum? Yeah, okay, I don't know. You know, you have those terms where you're not supposed to have the gender anymore. That kind of thing. The 2012 cohort of Teach for Pakistan. So Zohra has also served as a senior faculty member at the Government Teacher College in Karachi, and where she was part of the team transforming the college into a model of excellence for teacher education. So this is the work with Doorbeen, is it? Yeah, okay, cool. Zohra is a Fulbright alumna and received her Master's of Education in Learning and Instruction from Vanderbilt in 2016. Zohra, thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective from the ground. I know that Doorbeen has been doing some very, very exciting work. And our final panelist is Tooba Akhtar. Excuse me. So Tooba Akhtar is the Chief Program Officer at Teach for Pakistan and an alumna of Teach for Pakistan's first cohort in 2011. So I'm assuming that Tooba, you wanted to get you know, Tooba, going by that response, you could run for an election, I guess. Tooba is responsible for overseeing programmatic development and success at the organization. And I guess evidence also that Tooba has been very good at her job. She's been looking at recruitment, leadership, training, and alumni impact. Tooba is also a Fulbright alumni, having received her Master's of Education in International Education Policy from Harvard. So thank you so much, Tooba, for joining us today. I don't know, should I be introducing myself? I'm Dr. Soufia Siddiqi. I'm an assistant professor at the LUMS School of Education. My research work focuses primarily on teacher education and teacher policy, and most of my work has to do with KP. So ज़्यादातर मेरा काम KP के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है और आजकल मैं KP के टीचर एजुकेशन पॉलिसी और टीचर पॉलिसी ब्रॉडली पे किताब भी लिख रही हूँ. Yeah, I guess let's get started. आज की जो गुफ्तगू है उसको थोड़ा सा मैं स्ट्रक्चर देना चाहूँगी and then I'll hand it over to the panelists. So दो चीज़ें हैं. पहली चीज़ ये है कि मैं चाह रही हूँ कि हम सब थोड़ी थोड़ी अपनी एक पोजीशन समझा सकें ऑडियंस को और ये बता सकें कि हम क्या समझते हैं कि पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक अच्छा उस्ताद या अच्छी उस्तानी कौन होती है और वो क्यों नहीं पैदा हो पा रहे. बिकॉज पाकिस्तान के अंदर ये बहुत एक बड़ी असम्पशन है या फ़र्ज़ किया जाता है कि सारे ज़िंदगी के दुनिया के सारे मसाइल पाकिस्तान के असातिज़ा की नाअहली की वजह से हैं. एंड हकीकतन ये इस तरह नहीं है बिकॉज यू नो आवर टीचर्स वर्क वेरी हार्ड इन स्कूल्स. अगर आप हालात देखें आप सब वाकिफ़ होंगे कि जिन हालात का सामना करके आप पढ़ाने जाते हैं सो आपको एक अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस मिल गया होगा कि इतना आसान नहीं है और इतना सही भी नहीं है ये कहना कि पाकिस्तान के असातिज़ा सही काम नहीं कर रहे इसीलिए पूरा तालीमी निज़ाम बैठ चुका है. राइट. सो थोड़ा सा मैं ये चाहूँगी कि आज के हमारे सारे पैनलिस्ट अपने अपने पर्सपेक्टिव से हमें बता सकें कि उन्होंने क्या देखा, क्या सुना, क्या किस चीज़ के बारे में उन्होंने क्या कोशिश की. फिर मैं चाहूँगी कि इसका थोड़ा सा हम 25 से 30 मिनट कोशिश करें कि हम सवालात ले सकें आप सब से ताकि फिर उसके जवाब में हमारे पैनलिस्ट मुख्तलिफ अपने जो भी पोजीशंस हैं उनको मज़ीद वाज़े कर सकें. So does that sound good to everybody in the audience?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get started. So we'll start with Irfan sahab. Irfan sahab, अगर आप थोड़ा systemic perspective से बात कर सकें कि आपकी experiences पंजाब के पी के खास तौर पे teacher reform policy से जो जुड़ी हुई experiences हैं, and then आप तो खुद teacher रह भी चुके हैं, तो that journey from being a teacher and practicing to then kind of setting up policies for teachers makes a good teacher.
Can you hear me? So I think I have about 5 minutes or so, right, to do that. So I think I'll just pick on your part of your question जहाँ आप कह रही हैं कि आपने क्या देखा. So मैंने क्या देखा उसको मैं सुनाने की कोशिश करता हूँ. And then I think उसमें से कुछ ऐसे शायद ऐसे एलिमेंट्स सामने आ जाएं जिसको then we can carry them further. So it will be my own story as a teacher, right? I started teaching physics in 1992. When I started teaching, I had not undergone any teacher education program, right? So no teacher training whatsoever. And it's interesting, and I think I want this to be marked because a lot of us, and I've come across people who think that teacher education or teacher training is not needed. And at that time in 1992, I also thought that I was a good teacher without having gone through any teacher training. And why did I think so? Because I was carrying in my head the image of what it means to be a good teacher, which found its place in my head because of the observation that I had been doing as a student for as long as I was a student in my school, in high school, in college. You know, we all come across good teachers. And while we are taught by them, we also carry some of what good teaching is all about in our head with us, right? And those definitions of good teaching may not be very desirable, you know, from a teacher education, from modern teacher education perspective, but that's what we have that we're carrying in our heads, right? Some people also call it apprenticeship of observation. You know, we observe teachers in action and we develop ideas about what teaching is all about. And so I was one of those teachers. I thought I was a good teacher until in 1995 it was that I became a teacher education, which was not something that I had planned. But I found myself in Ali Institute of Education as a teacher educator in their Department of Mathematics Education. This is 1995. Now, Ali Education institution was pretty much like दूरबीन है जैसे आपका ना कि वहाँ पर it had become a place where people were coming in from Stockholm Institute of Education. We had travelers coming in from Teachers College, Columbia University, and you know, if we talk about, look at it as from the lens of cosmopolitanism, we had a lot of discursive strands coming together at one place. तो वहाँ हमें पता चला कि project based learning क्या होती है, child centered learning क्या होती है, constructivism क्या है, so on and so forth. And at that point, I thought, oh my God, this is really hard. You know, I thought teaching was very simple, but it's not that, and so you have to think about a lot of other things when you teach. So it's complex, right? And so that was the kind of understanding that one develops when one is with teacher education. I remember a legendary teacher whose name was Robert Langland. I don't know if people in the room know him. He came to Pakistan when we became independent and stayed here. I met him at Ali Institute of Education where he was visiting, and I asked him a question: what do you think about teacher education? And his response was, I mean, he looked at me and he smiled and he said, young man, I was young at that time, he said, all you need to teach well is a sound knowledge of your subject and a passion to teach. So that's the kind of idea about teaching that a lot of us they carry with them throughout their careers, that teacher training and teacher education is not really needed. Okay, the last thing that I want to tell you is the year 2000, when I was doing my doctoral degree, that I came across these efforts to professionalize teaching in the United States. And so what was happening there was that this is how the argument went. There are all of these professions like engineering and medicine, they have their own specialized knowledge base, right? But when you think about teaching, everybody seems to know, because of the apprenticeship observation that I've just mentioned, what teaching is all about, right? And so some of them argued that teaching also has a specialized knowledge base, and they called it pedagogical content knowledge. Many of us might be aware of that. And so those were some of the things that I wanted to tell before we move on to the next panelist, because I think what we have really is, what good teaching is all about is kind of perceived between two poles. On one side you have the professional standards and stuff like pedagogical content knowledge and all of that stuff that comes with professionalization of teaching. On the other hand, you have apprenticeship observation, where you can have 1 million opinions about what good teaching is all about, right? And so somewhere in that spectrum, we kind of perceive what good teaching is all about based on our experiences.
Thank you so much, Irfan. So I really appreciate that experience. Just to kind of bring two things together, अभी जो आपने बातें की हैं, एक जो ज़ोहरा मैं आपसे सवाल पूछना चाहूँगी, and hopefully you can build that into your larger comment, which is जो अभी इरफान साहब ने जिक्र किया apprenticeship observation के बारे में, तो जो practicum है, and I think कि आप लोग ने भी दूरबीन के साथ जो काम किया है, practicum होता है component teacher training programs के अंदर, so it isn't like we've abandoned the idea कि observation के ज़रिए लोग सीख सकते हैं teaching के बारे में, but do you think कि pedagogy scientific है? Right? Because that's the kind of the other end of the spectrum now. And it's this tension. Do we have a scientifically reproducible way of teaching people how to teach? Like it's come to a situation जहाँ लम्स के professors को भी कहा जाता है कि आप जाके teaching training लेकर आए तो फिर आप पढ़ाएं. So what do you think, Zohra? Over to you.
Absolutely. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about this idea of apprenticeship of observation that Dr. Irfan Muzaffar talked about. We're all observing teachers all around us. We've all been students. We've all observed teachers for at least 16 years, probably more. A lot of us have kids. We're observing teachers in their classrooms as well. Teaching is the one profession that everybody has an opinion on, but nobody really has expertise on. And that's where we err with this idea of observation. We think just because we've seen it, we know what it is. And I think we really need to unpack that. I think we also need to go back to the history of how teaching as a profession started and see why that has informed what we believe about a good teacher. So how did teaching really start here in the subcontinent? It started as a missionary mission, where Christian missionaries were sent into this newly ruled land, and they were setting up these church-based schools that were trying to civilize the population in a different kind of way. So and a lot of the schools in the early years of this country were convent schools, and the people who worked in them were missionaries. We've retained a lot of this attitude about teaching, not just in the subcontinent, but also in the US and also across the world. We think that teachers are people who are there for the spiritual development of the young, who are there to nurture the young, who are largely female and maternal and taking care of children. And we think that these people are selfless human beings who will do everything just for rewards in the afterlife. सवाब के लिए काम करने वाले लोग बिल्कुल selfless. तो जब हम इस तरह टीचिंग के बारे में सोचते हैं तो हम टीचिंग को एज अ प्रोफेशन नहीं लेते, हम उसको एक कॉलिंग की तरह लेते हैं और फिर वो बहुत एक अनसुपरवाइज्ड इनफॉर्मल रेल्म में चली जाती है. So some of the work that I've done with Durbeen and what Durbeen is trying to accomplish as an organization is to go back and examine these ideas. Can anyone be a teacher? Should anyone be a teacher? Is teaching just about nurturing and spirituality? Is it just something that is that doesn't need training? The idea that Durbeen proposes is that no, actually, teaching is this very rigorous, very high responsibility profession. And no one should be teaching who isn't trained to and who isn't accredited to. So I know we're a really long way away from the vision, but the idea is that eventually every teacher who walks into a school in Pakistan, whether it's a private school or a public school, should have a degree, should have a license saying that they know what they're doing and we can trust them in their classroom. And through Durbeen's work in advocacy, they've actually passed a law in Sindh where we now for the first time have a teacher licensure exam, which 4,000 teachers sat for. And those teachers who passed the exams were inducted into the government service at a high level, at a prestigious level. And interestingly, Durbeen graduates passed that exam in high numbers with really great performances as well. So we know we were doing something right there. So I do think that teaching is something that should be treated as a profession and not just as something that anybody can do. Why? I'll go back to my experiences with Teach for Pakistan here. When I started with Teach for Pakistan, just like all of you, I had a lot of passion. I really wanted to do well by the students that I was serving, but did I know what I was doing? Did I know what I should be teaching, how I should be teaching it, and more importantly, how to be around my students? I still look back at some of the things that I said, some of the things that I did in my classroom, and I now, knowing what I know after my master's degree, I sometimes think, hey, I did a lot of good, but I may have caused some damage too, and there's no way to undo the damage that I did. So on a personal level, what was the damage that I was doing? I didn't know how to manage my frustration. I wasn't a very patient person. How did that translate across to my students? I was just really, really focused on grades and academic achievement, and this idea that so many people, Dr. Prajvani, etc., have talked about today. Where was the heart? Was I nurturing people's hearts as much as their academic outcomes? So I think somebody who goes into a place where young, vulnerable populations who don't have any control over the interactions that they're going to have are at your mercy. You need to have thought about it really deeply. And that's where I think teacher education, high quality, rigorous teacher education is so important. What is that going to teach you? That's going to teach you content knowledge, that's going to teach you observational skills, that's going to teach you pedagogical knowledge. It's also going to teach you how to manage yourself, your emotional regulation, who you are as a person, who you want to be, so that you can then take that forward to students a little bit better. And I think we need more institutions that are offering this. When we talk about how are we going to empower teachers, the first step is setting up more and more institutions and programs that do a rigorous job of this. That is again part of the core mission of Durbeen. And one of the steps that we've taken in collaboration with the AKU IED is offering an MPhil scholarship program so that people who are interested in taking on this work of teacher education can help and can get the qualifications to do so. So I would encourage all of you to really look that up as well. Dr. Soufia talked about practicum and is pedagogy scientific. So I would say yes, the apprenticeship of observation that comes through practicum, the guided practice that comes through having a supervised teaching experience and a supervised observational experience, I think it's incredibly valuable because talking about theory and talking about practice are totally different things. Any high quality teacher training program should have a practical component. And then this question of is pedagogy scientific? I think absolutely it is. I think you need to know about how the brain works some of you were in the room yesterday when I talked about neural connections and how the brain actually is set up. If you don't understand that as an educator, I think you lose out. So part of the B.Ed program is studying psychology, is studying brain development, is studying all of this, as well as thinking about how can an idea be broken down into chunks that people can understand and how can it be modeled. So these are very sort of technical and scientific ideas. So that's basically where I am. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zohra. And I think that, that's quite comprehensive and that covers many different aspects to how we think about teachers, teaching, getting them ready to teach. And Tooba, what I want to kind of bring to your attention is this point about we need more institutions. So HEC ने एक ज़माने में ये experiment किया हुआ पाकिस्तान की universities के साथ कि हर जगह universities खोल लो, and we're still not a fantastic country in terms of university quality. So मेरा सवाल ये होगा आपसे specifically कि आपके जो तजुर्बा रह चुका है Teach for Pakistan के साथ और अभी भी आप उनके साथ ही हैं, आप लोग ये सब कुछ कर रहे हैं ना? You're paying attention to pedagogic knowledge, content knowledge, but वो जो surrounding structures हैं जिसके अंदर ये एक आप बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस मॉडल भी पैदा कर लें, उस स्ट्रक्चर के अंदर जब आप जाते हैं, what happens then? And relatedly कि जो HEC ने B.Ed के जो आउटलाइन दी हुई है, अगर उसको ही हम जारी रखें तो is that sufficient? Because I personally don't think it is, but I want to know from you what your experience has been.
So far be it from me to talk about the sufficiency or not of B.Ed models and what the guidelines are, but I can talk a little bit about what we see. What I've seen, at least in the context of our work with Teach for Pakistan, and I think more importantly, how some of the fundamentals, when they come together, how even within the same structures, you can see very, very drastically different classrooms. And so I'll start from that. We work in government schools across the rural sectors of Islamabad and now also in Karachi. And in the past, I've also worked in disadvantaged contexts. And so on average, when we start teaching, the kids we're working with are 4 years behind where they need to be. So class 5 ka bacha, basics class 1 ki aksar nahi kar sakta. In 2 years of Teach for Pakistan academic time, which is academically that's less time, kids grow by 4.4 years on average. That's tremendous amounts of growth. ये वही government school है, ये वही government school की किताबें हैं, ये वही buildings हैं, वहाँ पे उतनी बिजली जाती है, all of that, right? And so हमने क्या सीखा है about even within these environments, principally वही है, बाकी school की teachers भी वही हैं. What is enabling this to come together? And some of that we've been talking about in the early parts of the day. And honestly, without sounding overly simplistic, it's some of that stuff we've been talking about all morning because it's not rocket science anymore. We do understand some of these things. All of us do. We talk about them all of the time. And I think how they comes together has to be connected with purpose again. Because I think if we want a teacher and what we define good teaching, we always have to go back to, are we recruiting a teacher for that purpose? इस मुल्क में साबुन बेचने के लिए भी आपसे पूछेगा भाई साबुन क्यों बेच रहा है और उसका भी सही और गलत जवाब है. You can potentially not be hired by an FMCG if you give you the wrong answer of why you want to sell soap and shampoo. But for a teacher, are we asking people why do you want to be a teacher? I don't know. I don't think so. We're still not thinking about what are the competencies required for effective teaching, for what we are actually asking our teachers to do and aligning our recruitment systems to that. And we have talked in the morning a lot about support systems and how do we professionalize some of that. And I think second, third, that has to go hand in hand. But I think we haven't really talked about on what competencies are we bringing people in, because if you don't bring in people for those competencies, you can do lots, but you can't expect them to do what you haven't hired them for.
Tooba, you've picked picked up on a really, really important point, and I think this is exactly where, Rabea, I would love to bring you in, not just because you're the last panelist, but because specifically you've looked at these questions from a systemic perspective, Rabea. This thing that Tooba is saying, that we're not asking when we're recruiting why you want to be a teacher. We're not asking what your plans are when you do join the service. You know, in your review and reflection on wider systems, especially systems outside of Pakistan, I know that you've been on studies with, for example, Badi Sab is somewhere here. Badi Sab, sorry, I can't see you because the lights. But you know, looking at Ghana, for instance, and looking at other contexts, are you able to say more about zooming out? Is there like a political economy obstacle that we keep running into in the Pakistan context when it comes to thinking truly and genuinely about teacher reform?
Thanks very much. So I think there is. I think the way, so some of these points have been touched on, I think, across the day in discussions. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Rabea, can you guys hear her? Okay, they can hear you.
Sorry. So, you know, across the day, it's sort of been spoken about that the teachers are almost, they're the final, they are the frontline service delivery providers, and the system tends to think of them as such. And various panelists have spoken about the course, they've spoken about other matters, including recruitment, etc. But I think one thing, so the system, in the way, the most dominant framework for thinking about the system is one that came up of the RISE project, which was also discussed in the first panel this morning, I believe. And it's often it's offered a very useful way of thinking about the different stakeholders and the roles they play in education services. It also helps visualize where the teachers are within the system, but also how other stakeholders are thinking about the teacher. So this is deviating a little bit from the question you asked in terms of international examples, and I hope I can come to that. But if I may very quickly sort of speak about the political economy of it, is the position of the teachers within the system tends to be at the bottom of many different hierarchies. So if the system is made up of, you know, administrators, policymakers, politicians, students, citizens, etc., and it comes together in terms of accountability, the teachers tend to be at the wrong end or the business end of the relationship accountability for almost everybody. So you make up the policy for it, and it applies to teachers, whether it's teacher training policies, whether it's support policies, etc. You make up the curriculum, and the teachers are meant to, you know, sort of execute that within classrooms, etc. Who is it that the teachers hold accountable within this system? So if a well-functioning system has relationships of accountability, and most of these go across in both ways, so, who is it that the teachers themselves, once they come in, if you get their recruitment right, etc., where is their voice within the feedback loop that helps systems of education work well? You can look at private systems and you can look at public systems as well. Are teachers able to voice what they need and how they need it? If new policies are introduced, are they able to, support policies are needed for sure, but how are those support policies that are imagined designed in the first place? Do they have teachers part of the design process of the policy, part of the implementation process, part of the evaluation process of the policy itself? And how does that then, you know, sort of pan out and get fed back into the peopleization of the policy? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in the academic discourse, comparisons across systems, the frameworks that identify how systems function well are still imagining teachers in a particular role where their own feedback and voices are missing from helping reorient the system in a way that it can function well. And we may find examples from across different countries that there are, I don't know how well this has been investigated, but where the voices of teachers, where there are feedback mechanisms that are functioning better, do you see higher motivation, better performance, etc.? So even while we speak about support teachers, providing more finance to teachers, to schools, etc., it feels to me we're still talking at them because our conceptualization of the roles of teachers is still as kind of mechanistic agents that exist to perform what they're told to do. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Rabea. I think I'm going to switch to Urdu for a little bit and summarize कि अभी तक जो बातचीत हुई है उसमें I think जो बड़े सवालात जो उठ के उभर के सामने आ रहे हैं उसमें सबसे बड़ा सवाल तो ये है कि हमारे निज़ाम के अंदर रहते हुए हम किसी भी टीचर को, उस्ताद को या उस्तानी को हम तैयार हैं उनकी आवाज़ सुनने के लिए, ये जानने के लिए जो हार्श रियलिटीज़ वो शायद आपको बता देंगे कि हम किन हालात के अंदर रह के काम कर रहे होते हैं। एंड मैंने अपनी रिसर्च के दौरान बहुत से टीचर्स से इस तरह के सवाल पूछे कि अगर आपको कोई टीचर प्राइज़ मिले या अगर आपको कोई टीचर कार्ड मिले, टीचर कार्ड से मुराद कि आपको डिस्काउंट्स मिल जाएंगे एट्सेट्रा, किसी आप म्यूज़ियम में आपको डिस्काउंट मिल जाएगा अंदर जाने के लिए। वैसे तो म्यूज़ियम्स बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं हैं लेकिन जो हैं अगर उनमें डिस्काउंट्स मिल जाएँ या फिर अगर किताबों पे आपको कोई रियायत पेश की जाए बुक स्टोर्स में एट्सेट्रा तो आप खुश होंगे। एंड द इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग इज़ कि बाहरी अक्सर ये टीचर्स कहते थे कि ये किस किस्म का मजाक है। एंड इट्स इंटरेस्टिंग बिकॉज हम लोग पॉलिसी दफातर में बैठ के एग्जैक्टली इसी तरह की गुफ्तगू कर रहे होते हैं असातिज़ा के बारे में कि उनको कोई स्टार दे दो, कोई बोनस दे दो, कोई अवार्ड दे दो। एंड द नंबर वन थिंग दैट टीचर्स वांट जिसका जिक्र रबिया ने किया है दे वांट कि जो उनके बारे में पॉलिसी बनाई जा रही है, जो उनके लिए बनाई जा रही है, उस कमरे में उनको बिठा दें ताकि उनकी भी आवाज़ शामिल की जाए। उससे एटलीस्ट जहाँ तक मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है ना, आई गेस इस बात पे तो शायद सभी अब इत्तेफाक करते हैं कि इससे हमें सिर्फ एक चीज़ और सबसे अहम चीज़ पता चलती है, वो ये है कि हमारे असातिज़ा सोच रहे हैं और इसीलिए वो सवाल उठाना चाहते हैं कि जो काम हमसे करवाए जा रहे हैं हमसे भी पूछ लिया जाता कि हम ये करने के काबिल हैं या नहीं, और अगर करने के काबिल हैं तो किस तरीके से और कब और कैसे, राइट। सो आई थिंक अगर हम वहाँ से थोड़ा सा वी ओपन अप द फ्लोर, आई वुड लव कि आप लोग अपने तजर्बे के बुनियाद पे हमसे भी सवालात पूछ सकें, लेकिन थोड़ा सा मैं हट के, आई नो यूजली ये Q&A इसको कहा जाता है, वो पाकिस्तान में QC&A होता है, क्वेश्चन कमेंट्स भी होते हैं देन आंसर्स। तो अगर किसी ने कमेंट भी शेयर करना है तो नो हार्म, एंड आई वुड अप्रिशिएट कि पीछे से कोई आवाज़ ये ना कसे कि क्वेश्चंस नॉट कमेंट्स या क्वेश्चंस नॉट स्पीचेस वाले कमेंट्स। मैं अभी कल थिंक फेस्ट में थी लाहौर में, तो वहाँ पे इस तरह की बातें बहुत हो रही थी। सो आई वुड encourage कि अगर if you have something nice to share as a comment, that would be welcome as well, so that this is kind of a participatory model. And I think that that's what the teachers want as well, कि पाकिस्तान में अगर हमने fundamentally सबसे पहले तालीमी निज़ाम को असातिज़ा के लिए मुनासिब बनाना है तो सबसे पहले उनकी आवाज़ को हमने कुछ लोग कहेंगे बहाल करना है क्योंकि एक ज़माने में असातिज़ा की आवाज़ थी पाकिस्तान में, और कुछ लोग कहेंगे फ़ाल करना है क्योंकि उनके नज़रिए में असातिज़ा की कभी भी आवाज़ नहीं रही। सो डिपेंडिंग कि आप किस वर्ल्ड व्यू के साथ जुड़े हुए हैं either one would be okay. We can, shall we open up for some questions, yeah, even comments on in your considered experiences, आपने स्कूलों में क्या देखा है, सुना है. And just one thing that I want you to be able to maybe help us understand better, because आप लोग के पास वो granular on-ground details हैं. मसूदा बानो एक researcher है, उन्होंने एक research paper लिखा जिसमें वो बात करती हैं कि अगर किसी भी आम से स्कूल के अंदर, खा वो लो कॉस्ट प्राइवेट स्कूल हो या इवन गवर्नमेंट का स्कूल हो, उसमें एक भी अच्छी टीचर अगर आ जाए, अच्छा टीचर आ जाए, तो उसके अंदर पूरे स्कूल का कल्चर बदल सकते हैं वो लोग. So that this is basically tying in with that idea of being a champion of change, right? An agent of change. So we would love to hear more from you guys about whether you think you can be the champions of change in your respective schools. And of course, अगर आपने कुछ और भी पूछना तो आप पैनल से पूछ सकते हैं. Should we open up for questions? Is there a mic going around?
This is so unethical, and I'm gonna ask the first question. I know this is very morally questionable, but I have a burning question. I think we have, those of us who've been in education for like the last maybe 2 decades, we've heard a lot about all of the various pieces of reform that are happening within teacher recruitment and teacher development. And so from the panel, I would love to know, because from the outside looking in on these policy reforms, sometimes it feels like we can't understand whether it's 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. Are we just kind of stuck in the same rut and just whirring our wheels, or are we actually making any progress? So I would love some thoughts on that. Okay, from a policy standpoint, as from the point of view of teacher recruitment, teacher development, teacher management, teacher governance, are we making any progress? Anywhere in Pakistan actually.
Irfan sir, do you want to?
देखिए, so I can talk on the basis of some of the work that I was part of in KP and Punjab. I think the merit-based recruitment system, which started a couple years ago in KP, did represent some progress. Why do I say that? So in the KP, when we were there, we were regularly doing tests for the teachers as well. It was a teacher's need analysis, wasn't an assessment of their competencies, but it was also an assessment of their competencies, although done slightly indirectly. We could see a very clear difference between the teachers who were hired through the merit-based recruitment process after the merit-based recruitment policy, and the ones which were, more experienced but hired through other, on the basis of other policies. So there was clearly something which was done right, and so the subject matter knowledge, their ability to also absorb the new pedagogical kind of methods was also different, and I would say slightly better than the other teachers. So I think some of the teacher recruitment policies were making some difference. As far as teachers' professional development within the government is concerned, there's a lot to be said over there. I think there was some progress made, but as soon as you see some progress being made, things happen because of which you take 2 steps back. So you do take a step forward, but then you take 2 steps back, It all depends at times also on who's there at the top. So if you've got a good secretary, things will happen. Then you have to somehow do something to establish this on a sustainable basis. More often than not, that doesn't happen. So many a good programs that were introduced in KB and also in Punjab, I'm talking specifically of professional development. If you look at them today, they're not as good, or not enough attention is being paid to keep them up, the way they should be.
So I would say that we struggle with this. We feel like we keep wanting to induct more teachers into the system, and we somehow are not able to. So recruitment is that pain point And TFP is approaching it in a different way, and Durveed's approaching it in a different way. But I think it's worth examining, why is it such a pain point, Why aren't we able to recruit teachers into the system? And there's a couple of things that I just want to talk about that get down to bare bones basics. तुबा ने बोला आपको अगर साबुन बेचना है तब भी आपको जवाब चाहिए कि क्यों साबुन बेचना है, लेकिन कोई ये नहीं पूछेगा कि आपने क्यों साबुन नहीं बेचना। साबुन बेचना एक प्रेस्टिजियस एक्सेप्टेबल प्रोफेशन है जिससे आप एक बहुत कंफर्टेबल ज़िंदगी अपने लिए और अपनी फैमिली के लिए इस्टेब्लिश कर सकते हैं। क्या टीचिंग एक प्रेस्टिजियस प्रोफेशन है जिसके ज़रिए आप अपनी फैमिली के लिए एक अच्छी ज़िंदगी क्रिएट कर सकते हैं? I think we need to go back to basics and talk about this. What is the blockage? Are we paying teachers livable wages, which would make high quality graduates want to come into this profession? Are we making sure that teacher workloads are manageable and they're not on their feet for 6 hours a day dealing with 40 students? Are we making sure their working conditions are comfortable, that they have bathrooms, that they have electricity, that they have cooling and heating, that they have comfortable chairs to sit on? Are we making sure that there's a narrative around teaching that makes people want to be a teacher? When we went into the teaching profession, I was having this conversation with some younger fellows as well. A lot of people are just like, why are you doing this? तुम तो ज़हीन हो, तुम तो काबिल हो, तुम teaching में क्यों जा रहे हो? So I think first there's a lot of work that needs to be done around narrative, around working conditions. We ask, what do teachers need to do? But fundamentally, are we asking, what do teachers need? And can they actually do this job in a comfortable way? So I would say we haven't made a lot of progress on the practicalities of what it means to be a teacher. We've made a lot of progress on defining quality standards, defining accountability measures. They're not perfect, but they're there. But we're not really talking about these basic things: workload, compensation, infrastructure, comfort, safety. And we're still asking teachers, okay, don't teach, आप polio drops की campaign करवाएं, आप elections run करें, so what are we doing? I think we also need to start talking about these things and recognize that the wider infrastructure is probably what's something that's really stifling progress here.
So we're just in the interest of time, I want to move on to the next question, but I think that some of these themes will tie into what we talk about later as well. Irfan Sab and Rabea, I hope you don't mind. Sorry, Tooba and Rabea. There's a hand somewhere there.
Thank you. My name is Irfan and I work in the education sector. My question is that we all discussed at length that being conscious of what a student brings from home when they enter the school, like whatever their social status is, whatever the poverty, whatever the situation is. But I think what often doesn't make part of the discussion is what a teacher brings from home to the school also. We recognize that most of our teaching force is heavily women. The society in itself has quite a lot of other ills. There's gender-based violence, there's other massive kind of situations that women are going through in their own households, yet alone the burden of childbearing and child care for their own children. And then the responsibility of teaching in a school or an institution that often does not recognize other care facilities like maternity or other things that teachers also deserve. So I think one of the key things is what are the supporting elements that we can also think of for teachers in their own schools to have better policies, better health insurances, better requirements so they can function better and also deal with all what they bring from their homes to the school and possibly unwind before they get to interact with children and pass on any negativity if they're carrying with them because of that as well.
Tooba, can I just bring you in here because you at some level and scale, you are in the work of getting those teachers ready. What do you guys do to help them manage those different thought processes?
think we touched upon this a little bit when Fatma was speaking, but I think it is, I think it is first and foremost we are bringing people with the right competencies for what the work is cut out to be. It's hard work. I've done many things over the last 14 years. Teaching is still one of the hardest things I've done. And if you want to do it well with 60 kids, with 50 kids, with various learning levels, it's hard work. And so first and foremost, I think the thing we try and do is bring in people with the right competencies, and then we work really, really, really hard to give them both the skills and then the support they need. I think the support piece that Fatma spoke about earlier in the panel we were talking about earlier, the heart, teaching, learning, kids, nurturing, these are matters of the heart also. And I think that all of you have a workplace. If you didn't have a manager over X many years of your life tell you good job, how long would you be able to sustain your passion and so on and so forth, right? So our coaching model is central to what enables for our teachers, what we've learned over time, to do well, to grow, to thrive, to do well for their kids, but then also grow themselves. Because teaching is also something, particularly in the early years, that has a steep learning curve, and there's research upon that. So it's hard also to be a new teacher. So yeah, I think there's more things we can talk about, but I think the support piece and the coaching model, I mean, the world over, coaching is now one of the things that's recognized to be the most effective for teaching support. We're far from doing that in a way in Pakistan that actually gets teachers to be feeling supported. My fear about that is, it can't become another monitoring mechanism. And so for it to be really supportive, there's relational work involved there. So, I just want to leave it at that.
Rabea, can I just ask you to come in with some perspectives on that? I mean, you've been involved a little bit with AEOs, I think in Punjab, and you work with early childhood education context as well. What have been your learnings from some of those research environments?
So I think one of the things that's happening is that we're still talking at the teachers. We're talking at the head teachers. So to give you an example from a reform that Punjab introduced some time ago, which was the non-salary budget formula, which was designed to give head teachers more autonomy over how they spend for their school development and how much they spend. So to get rid of a lot of bureaucracy or money to show up the school accounts, and this was meant to encourage sort of efficiencies and also more effectiveness in that the head teacher would simply have more autonomy to do what they wanted to do with the money that showed up in their development accounts. And one of the things that was found out was that this wasn't being spent. And immediately it was like, oh, the head teachers don't have the capacity to spend. And so, here's a reform that was designed, but it's not effectively being implemented. On speaking to some of the head teachers, it becomes clear that years and years previous of learned knowledge that they're going to get audited end of the day for what they spend and how they spend, and auditing was not necessarily a school-friendly or a head teacher-friendly process, was keeping head teachers from spending undertaking development expenditures in their schools. And it took a really long time and quite a lot of engagement to let them know that the previous audit rules were not applying or that they had more freedom now than they did before, which the reform itself had not designed to incorporate. So that behavior or that voice or that perception of the teachers about the new reform, even though it was used to bring about efficiency, etc., hadn't taken the head teachers themselves or how they perceived this reform or how they were interacting with this reform into account. So similar to that, whenever new reforms are introduced, the teachers, and I guess scale has something to do with this when it comes to the government sector, in particular in Pakistan, across different provinces. The teachers are almost the last ones. So the system struggles to channel voices of teachers and mechanisms perhaps don't function effectively, that allows us to understand how the teachers are even interacting with the reforms. So we're looking at what we're inputting, we're looking at whether the outputs are being received or not, but we're not necessarily looking at the process of how teachers or other grassroots level actors are interacting with the system. तो अगर आप AEOs की बात करते हैं और coaches की बात करते हैं, उनसे क्या वाकई बैठ के आप पूछ रहे हैं कि जो आप का रोल है वो है क्या, या जो आप टीचर से पूछ रहे हैं कि कोचिंग जो आपको मिल रही है वो किस तरीके से जा रही है. If that type of data is collected in piloting phases of new interventions, I don't know how far that makes it to the eventual. I don't see, either in my policy engagements or in the research that I read, the interactions of the actors with reform is never the main thesis of any analysis or a policy brief. And that to me links to the initial point about how we're imagining teachers as part of the system. So even सुबह से जो सुन रही हूँ मैं, मुझे यही समझ आ रही है कि स्टूडेंट्स को भी और टीचर्स को भी हम थोड़ा सा इंस्ट्रूमेंटली देखते हैं. आउटकम्स हमने डिफाइन कर ली हैं और आउटकम्स हमारे लिए इम्पोर्टेंट हैं, लेकिन वो जो इंडिविजुअल्स खुद हैं, जो वो स्टेक होल्डर्स खुद हैं, वो सिस्टम का हिस्सा कैसे हैं और कैसे फंक्शन कर रहे हैं. These are complex questions that might not all get reduced to measurable indicators. But research or evaluations at least tend to focus on very measurable indicators. They do not tend to, documenting experiences, documenting voices tends to be more complex and requires methodologies that are complex and okay with complexity. So my experience has been that voices of these actors who we require to implement all the reform, all the practices, are not yet featuring in policy debates. I'll stop here. Policy discipline.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rabea. I think, I'm sorry guys, we have unfortunately run out of time. I will just end by saying that I think दो चीज़ें बहुत वाज़ेह हुई हैं, just even from this very brief round of interaction, was कि जब तक टीचर की वॉइस सामने नहीं आएगी, चाहे वो आप लोग लेकर आए as some kind of agent or champion of change, या फिर I would say कि even researchers का भी इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा काम बनता है, because जब तक आप असातिज़ा के साथ काम नहीं करेंगे और उनकी presentations नहीं लेकर आएंगे सामने, and then become that mechanism back into policy spaces, ताकि फिर आप दरवाजे खोलें कि असातिज़ा खुद आके फिर वो वेरीफाई करें जो बातें उन्होंने आपके साथ शेयर की हैं. I think that could be one way for Pakistan to start kind of getting the ball rolling on that important teacher voice, which is still missing very much from a lot of these decisions. Irfan Sahab wanted to say something about professionalism. Sorry, Irfan Sahab, we've run out of time. But I think most of what we've been saying does boil down to, do we even see teachers as a professional community? My final thought that I would want to leave everyone in the room with is, we're often told कि इस मुल्क में एक इदारा है जिसके 7 लाख के करीब employees हैं, right? उसका नाम है पाकिस्तान की फौज. We're also told कि जो federal service bureaucrats हैं वो almost 1.6 million के करीब अब इकट्ठे हो गए हैं. But guess how many teachers we have in Pakistan? Almost in excess of 2 million now, which is private and public combined. So the biggest community of employees in Pakistan is unfortunately treated so unprofessionally. Maybe it's time to raise a voice about whether we should look at that professional community for what it really is, and then take the conversation ahead from there. And I don't know if TFB is still here somewhere, but maybe the next conference should just be on teachers. That